Hey, what is up? And welcome to Where All the Ladies At. This is a podcast where I dive deep into history and try to figure out where the fuck all the women went because, as I always say, for being half the population, only a handful of us made it into the books, and that seems fishy. And it's even worse for women of color, which, by the way, this month is Black History Month, no matter what anybody says. And so I'm celebrating Black History Month, and we are diving deep into some very incredibly amazing Black women. We have already covered Sister Rosetta Tharpe and Madam C.J. Walker, and today we are covering the incomparable Josephine Baker. So, who am I? I am Kim. I am your host. I am a history nerd and lover of all things historical. I think archaeologists are superheroes. And I believe that there's so much of history left for all of us to try to figure out and learn that one person can't possibly know it all. But I'm going to try. All right, like I said, this month is Black History Month, so happy Black History Month. If you would like to reach out to me, there's ways to do that in the description box. There's also links to my Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon, so you can support the podcast. If you can't do that, if you'd like, comment, review, share, shout from the rooftops, everything you can do, please and thank you. It will get my podcast out there into the world, and hopefully we'll build a community here where we can talk about all these amazing women. There's also links to the Medium publication as well as my other podcast called Our Mystic Road Trip, where I talk about magical, mystical, spiritual kind of stuff, anything that falls under that woo-woo umbrella. And I think that's it for my housekeeping and my shameless plugging. So let's talk about Josephine Baker. Sorry, guys, I'm having a little bit of I'm old. I'm falling apart. I'm going to pet my cat. There we go. Hey, kitty. Mama. Oh, Mama. Sorry, guys. She wants love when she wants love. And if you're a cat owner, you know that you better give her the love. All right, guys. So we're talking about Josephine Baker. And you may know the name. I hope you know the name. She was a famous performer, but also a revolutionary, a spy, a fashion icon. She was everything. And she did it all while wearing some pretty interesting outfits. So as usual with this, what I'd like to say is I like to cover what was happening, where the topic of the podcast grew up, and during the time she would have grown up, and also a little bit what it was like for women at that time period. So that I think, because I think that understanding where they grew up like really helps you understand them and what they had to overcome. Sorry, I'm going to stretch out there. All right, so let's talk about that. Let's start with what was happening in St. Louis and New York City during the 20s and 30s. Okay, we're going to start with St. Louis. That's the city that she was born and raised in. It was the roaring 20s. And for Black people in St. Louis, life was not glamorous. Segregation was there. It was law. Every aspect was divided along racial lines. So that's schools, restaurants, buses, neighborhoods, everything, right? Opportunities for Black people at the time for upward mobility were almost non-existent. If you were Black and you were living there, you often had to take low-paying jobs. And those typically were highly physical, demanding jobs, or you had to navigate a society that seemed determined to keep you down. And yet St. Louis had this spirit, right? It was a rhythm, it was a soul, especially through the Black communities. Music was its lifeblood. Ragtime and jazz were always pouring out of bars and homes. There was this vibrant energy. The city was birthplace of ragtime, so thanks to Scott Joplin and a hub for jazzers, it was like W.C. Handy. All this happened in this area, right? The sounds weren't just entertainment. They were expressions of hope and resistance and resilience. And young Josephine grew up in this rich musical environment. She would have heard those rhythms on the streets, in the church, at home, everywhere around her. And that really planted the seed in her that would later bloom into who she became. Now, if we go to New York City, Harlem at this time was having a full-blown cultural explosion. The Harlem Renaissance. By the way, because I focus solely on women, but go check out Harlem Renaissance. There's some amazing things that happen, right? This is a time when Black excellence was celebrated and exemplified, right? Writers like Langston Hughes were penning poetry. Duke Ellington was creating sounds that would define American music. Florence Mills she was a dancer. She was captivating audiences, you know. Harlem was alive, and it was full of creativity, and that influence just rippled across America, right? But there was a catch, right? Because racism didn't take a break. Segregation was still very firmly in place, even in the North. I know a lot of people, here's the thing, guys, American history is very complex. And I know a lot of people, when they talk about segregation, they think of solely the South. But it was there in the North as well. And I think sometimes people forget it, right? So Black performers could headline legendary venues like the Cotton Club and dazzle audiences, but those audiences were almost entirely white. Black people were barred from enjoying the very performances from people from their community. Can you imagine just being a star of a show, hearing the applause, but knowing that in the audience, the only people that were enjoying it were the people that were keeping you separated? It's this dichotomy of like celebration and exclusion that is so, it's interesting but sad, right? And this defined that era. And this is the era that Josephine Baker was coming up through, right? At this time, women in the 1920s and 30s, there was a lot going on for them. And it wasn't the same for white women and Black women, right? For white women, the flapper era was happening. It was a time of rebellion against societal norms. They were cutting their hair, wearing short dresses, shocking their parents, smoking and drinking in public, right? All of these things. Women were stepping into the workforce in larger numbers, and the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920 gave them the right to vote, so this was a big milestone, but that new freedom for women was not extended to everyone. Black women, the battle was on two fronts. They had racism and they had sexism. And white women could celebrate all day long, right? That they had newfound political power. But Black women, especially in the South, but also in the North, were blocked from voting. They weren't allowed. Poll taxes, literacy tests, intimidation at the ballot box. All of these were common tactics to help keep them disenfranchised. The right to vote might have been written into the Constitution, but systematic racism still made it not even a reality for some women. In St. Louis, life was especially tough for Black women. Most worked as domestics, cleaning house, doing all this stuff that, rich white people didn't want to do. They were grueling, and these were low-paying jobs, and they offered no security, but they were really the only option that was available to them at the time. Black women in St. Louis carried the weight of their families and their communities on their shoulders. And so they found strength where they could. They found strength in church groups and mutual aid societies and each other, right? In New York, things were a little different. There were more opportunities, but they came with other sets of challenges, right? The Harlem Renaissance opened doors for Black women in the arts. They offered them roles as performers and writers and musicians, but we cannot romanticize it. Those opportunities often came with strings attached, and the strings. Colorism was rampant. This meant that the lighter-skinned Black women you were often got favored over for these roles, for these, right? Stereotypes about Black femininity ran deep, and many women had to navigate it, right? There was a fine line between expressing themselves and conforming to what white audiences wanted them to be. Josephine Baker saw this all, and she decided she wasn't playing by the rules. She looked at the narrow and really often degrading roles offered to black women in the United States, maids, chorus girls, comedic characters, and was like, no, I don't think so. So when Paris called, Josephine didn't hesitate. She packed her bags and left. And in France, she found a different kind of freedom, one that allowed her to redefine not just her career, but her identity as a black woman. She didn't just leave the US, she escaped it. And doing so, she really kind of blazed a trail that would inspire generations to come. So with that little spiel, let's get into Josephine Baker's story. She's so badass, man. All right, so let's dive deep, right? Josephine Baker was born Freda. I think it's Freda or Freda. I'm not sure. It's Freda. So if anybody wants to tell me exactly, I would say Freda Josephine McDonald. She was born in June of 1906 in St. Louis, into a world that seemed really, really like a world that wanted to hold her down. Her mother was a washerwoman with big dreams of being on stage. She didn't get to realize those dreams. Her father was a vaudeville drummer and left the picture pretty early, and that left Carrie to raise Josephine and her siblings all alone. You know, that's happened a lot, actually. Poverty was a constant thing in their lives, and Josephine learned early on that survival meant being resilient, right? As a child, Josephine often went to bed hungry. By the age of 8, she was working as a live-in maid for white families, and during not just like the grueling labor of the job, but also physical and emotional abuse. You know, when she was 13, she dropped out of school. She didn't see a point in education at that time. You know, it didn't promise her an escape from anything. That same year, she married Willie Wells, who was a local man who was much older than her. And it wasn't love; it was really desperation. A young girl hoping she just wanted some stability. The marriage didn't last very long, and she soon found herself back in the struggle, you know, working on jobs and performing on the streets of St. Louis. Despite these hardships, though, I will say, like, Josephine had a spark and a really, like, energy and a talent that it just can't be ignored. She caught her first big break when she joined the Jones Family Band, and that was a vaudeville troupe. She had a knack for comedy and a very unique dancing style, and that kind of set her apart. So by 1919, she'd remarried, this time to a man named Willie Baker, whose last name she kept even after their divorce. Josephine began touring with vaudeville acts and slowly building a reputation. And, you know, because she was funny and she could do new things on the stage. In 1921, she decided she landed a spot in the Dixie Steppers in Philadelphia. And by 1923, she had made her way to New York City, and that was during the Harlem Renaissance. There, she joined the chorus line of Shuffle Along, and that was an all-black musical, which was kind of groundbreaking at the time. She started as the last dancer in the line. Because of that comedic timing and ability to really like exaggerate the choreography, she got noticed, right? So Josephine wasn't just she was a star in the making. While New York gave her kind of this taste of success, it also showed her like the limits too that were placed on black performers in America, and the opportunities were very few. Expectations were restrictive, and Josephine wasn't really interested in playing second fiddle to anybody. So in 1905, she made a very, very bold move. She boarded a ship to Paris. She had a promise of a role in La Revue Negre, a show that celebrated African American music and dance. And Paris was everything that America wasn't. The French loved Josephine, right? They embraced her as an artist and celebrated her. She became pretty much an overnight success. And her performance at the Folies Bergère, wearing the now iconic a banana skirt, became one of the most famous acts in the world. But Josephine wasn't just about shock value. She brought artistry and humor to her routines. She liked to blend jazz and vaudeville and American dance and come up with this new unique thing, right? She was kind of really redefining what it was like for black women on the stage. And her influence actually went well beyond entertainment. When World War II broke out, she put her fame and connections to work as a spy for the French resistance. That's right, a spy for the French. She used her celebrity status as a cover. She smuggled messages, written in invisible ink on sheet music, and even hid information under her bed. Like, in her costumes. She also traveled across Europe and North Africa, entertaining Allied troops and boosting morale. And that courage didn't go unnoticed. She was awarded the Croix de Guerre, I think that's how you say it, and the Rosette de la Résistance for her contributions. And through it all, though, Josephine never ever forgot where she came from. She eventually returned to the United States in the 50s, and she joined the Civil Rights Movement, and she refused to perform for a segregated audience, and she spoke out against racial injustice. When Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, she was even offered the leadership of the movement. And though she ultimately declined, she had responsibilities for 12 adopted children who she called her rainbow tribe, so she couldn't really do that. Josephine's life was just utterly amazing. I think there was resilience, there was creativity, there was this courage. And I didn't even go into the fact she adopted like 12 kids. There's so much more to her thing, and she didn't care about color. She just adopted kids that needed to be adopted, which I think was pretty amazing. She went from the streets of St. Louis to grand stages of Paris, and she just was a trailblazer. Her legacy is just breaking barriers, uplifting others, and living her life the way she wants to live it. And I think that's amazing. Her impact really extended beyond her performances. She was a powerful advocate for equality and justice. She really used her platform and her fame to really challenge racism and fight for civil rights, which was really important in that time in the United States, because segregation was very entrenched, and Josephine refused, like I said, to perform for segregated audiences. She demanded that venues be desegregated if they wanted her to grace their stages, and that set a precedent, right? Her stance wasn't just symbolic. It was a direct challenge to what was the status quo of the time. Pretty amazing. One of her most defining moments, though, came in 1963 during the historic March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Josephine was the only woman invited to speak at the event. Sharing stage with civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King. She dressed in a French military uniform, and she adorned with, she delivered this powerful and this personal message, right? She spoke of her dream of, racial harmony and drawing from her own experience of overcoming prejudice and equality. It's just something internationally. Josephine also was pretty profound. In France, the country that embraced her, she was celebrated not only for artistry but also for contributions. Like I said, she won some awards from them. But Josephine's commitment to unity and equality wasn't limited to activism. She brought her ideas into her personal life with the Rainbow Tribe, as I said earlier. This is how she described her family of 12 adopted children from various racial and ethnic backgrounds. She raised these children at her chateau in France, La Mille Colonies, I think that's how you say that, intending to be like a global village. Josephine's goal was to prove that love and understanding could overcome any prejudice, right? The Rainbow Tribe was an extension of her activism, and it embodied her belief in equality. And I think that's beautiful. Josephine's advocacy, and it has inspired tons of she inspired so many people, and it really redefined what it meant to be a performer, especially for Black women of the time. I think we wouldn't have artists like Beyonce or Rihanna if it wasn't for Josephine Baker. So she was a force of nature, and just a woman who really transcended barriers and shattered stereotypes. And she lived her life, man, with unyielding commitment to her beliefs, and that included justice, equality, and love. And that is amazing. And Josephine Baker is just something special. So if you get a chance, go check her out. I think there's a couple movies about her, of course, because if nothing else, pick up a book, read about her, because she is a pretty amazing woman. And that's it for this week, guys. I hope I inspired you to go check out Josephine Baker, and I hope you inspired you to check out other Black women of massive importance and everything. I'm having a really great time covering these ladies. There's so much amazing things to find out, and I have one more week of Black History Month, and that will be coming. Gabadu, I think is her name, the goddess, and then the incomparable. Once again, I use that word again because it feels right. Ida B. Wells. So that's my last week of Black History Month, and then we'll roll into Women's History Month because I'm gonna keep celebrating these things because the voices and the stories need to be told. And Black history and women's history and Asian Pacific Islander history and Pride history, those are all part of American history. And I know that I may not only have American viewers, but right now in this day and age and time, I feel like I need to sometimes address those American viewers a little bit more. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed about Josephine Baker. Once again, happy Black History Month, and I will see you next week, guys. Stay curious.